Rich, man, great to have you back on the show. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here as always, Joel. Thanks so much for thinking of me and for the invite, man. Lots of fun stuff to discuss for sure.
Yeah, one thing before we get to the training, I just wanted to bring this up because I think it's funny. Like vertical jump scores, like just how wide of an array you can get. If you do a just jump mat, you might jump like 37, but then if you did like a hands on the hips, like force plate, it's like half that height or something. It's like so much lower. And I think the plyomat will register somewhere in the middle, but you also have the just jump mode.
Yeah.
Tell me, I mean, it's just interesting how, the array of results.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that. Like, how do you have like a realistic yet hopefully a little optimistic way of feedback loops for athletes with their jumping?
Yeah. The just jump really kind of ruined it for all of us, to be honest. I respect it as to why I think that they inflated it purposefully to match like the Vertec numbers at the time. Because Vertec
Mm.
is really close to just jump,
Oh
like
yeah.
really, really close. And so that's where I think Paul Mackajack, who created the Just Jump Mat back in 1991, I think that's what he was kind of going for is like, what, algorithm, what can I adjust to see how close I can get it to the Vertex? Or else maybe he's thinking, I won't sell any of these because they're so much lower than the Vertex. So
Yeah, it's
I think that
demoralizing.
was I think that was his kind of business acumen, even though he's an engineer by trade. I think he was, or maybe somebody told him that. Maybe somebody I mean, I've met Paul several times. I never really asked him that either because even at the time when I was interacting with him, I thought the just jump was accurate. We just kind of assumed that it was the end all be all. And 30 years later, people are like McMahon. That wasn't that long, that much later. I mean, John McMahon created that formula that was like the correction equation to bring it back down to earth, to what like force plates are telling you and what real vertical is. But nonetheless, 30 years is a long time. And so the issue that I face as the owner of Plyomat is I'm now dealt the card of all switch mat technology is the same, which is not true. So the Just Jump Mat has that purposeful inflation, whereas us and then even Skyhook that's out now, Swift, the Fusion Sports Just Jump Mat from back or the Smarter Jump from back in the day, all of our numbers are comparable to what you would see on a force plate, depending on your jump strategy. But the Just Jump was significantly higher. So then when my business partner and I first we had our first prototype 5 years ago. We're testing it, and I'm like, this is crazy. I don't know if this is going to work. And I just begin to question, like, why is this so much lower? I mean, it was 5 to 7 inches lower than what the Just Jump is telling me. So I'm, busting out the high speed cameras, comparing the Just Jump controller to our controller on the oscilloscope, and seeing what's exactly saying. So I just begin this 1 month process of figuring out exactly what that discrepancy was, why it existed, and so here we are today with the option for the Just Jump mode to be toggled on, because I also in that process figured out, what sort of an uptick it was. Because there's a lot of people that want that data continuity. They have 15, 20 years of data on the Just Jump mat, and they wanted to upgrade to the Plyomat, but they didn't want to lose all that data. And so I basically at least created the option for them to maintain that. And Mike Boyle was probably one of the first ones that really stood his ground on that. And I will also say that probably 70% of our customers use the Just Jump mode on.
Oh,
And
interesting. That's
yeah,
interesting.
it's just more of what they're used to. And these are Americans, right? Like nobody overseas though is using the Just Jump mode. I mean, like,
More used to force plates maybe and the less well, once it's like that saying of once you get intensity in training, and not that it's just totally the same, but like the idea, like once you start like dumping super intense stuff in training, like depth jumps and
yeah,
over, eccentric squats and overspeed, like it's hard to go back. And I think in the same way, once you're used to seeing certain numbers, it's demoralizing for an athlete to go back because they don't know the difference.
yeah,
For me, I use the just regular mode because to me it's just a game. It's almost nice because I know I'm gonna be 43 in September. I'm not gonna jump what I did in my 20s and early 30s. Hopefully close, but it's almost like it's a reset button because I know it's like a new bracket of scores, if that makes sense. Because
yeah,
that's
it
what
is.
I'm comparing it to. thing.
And I think what I hope is a lot of our conversation is around this word I'm about to use, but it's all about context. Like so much of what we're all trying to figure out in this crazy world of enhancement and development and using technology to guide that process is like we just need context. When I first started using force plates with Hawking Dynamics, I've used force plates in grad school, but back in the day, it was like you're sitting there interpreting all the lines of data, and you're like, when does the jump actually start? When does it stop? And thankfully, software has come a long way where it does all that for you. And as I'm using it, I'm still now like with the 55 metrics I'm getting with one jump, I need to establish context for what this is telling me. What does this mean? Is this where I want this athlete to be? Like, what about 3 months from now when we do this kind of training, what should I expect to see with the relative breaking net impulse and some of these other like unique metrics that I've not been able to evaluate before?
Mm.
And so like, the more information you start to uncover, the more context you need. And I think that's where a lot of us, if I were to backtrack now, feel safe with the just jump mode on, because we know that context. Like, whether it's inflated or not, I know like a 40-inch standing vert on the just jump mat is legit, and I also know a 36-inch is good and a 30 and and when I'm evaluating kids, which I, had the pleasure of working with the GEC for so long, we had, over 1,000 different athletes take our class at GEC in the 6 years I was there. And I had all the context in the world because I'm just getting so much data. And so the just jump mat is useful, right? It's good and it was consistent. And I think people are quick to poo-poo on it and other pieces of tech, maybe that have just been around for a while because of quote unquote inaccurate. But man, they still provided us with some key context to allow us to track improvement. And that's really what it's all about. If we're being honest, we're not all necessarily working in a lab trying to come up with the most gold standard way to evaluate something, even though we need that. As long as you're using a piece of tech consistently and coaching well and all the things are the same, that's kind of Mike Boyle's approach. So every, year on Twitter, when we bring this back out again, that the just jump mat's inflated, because not a month goes by where I don't have to re-educate somebody on why that is and what that means. And here we are talking about it on the podcast again. The very first thing is because so many people are unfamiliar with the discrepancy and why it exists and so forth. But, at the end of the day, context is key. And that's why Mike Boyle still uses the same, deal from 15 years ago, and will continue to use the same one because he knows what it's telling him.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to, something with that I think of is the context, for like a data perspective. But I think about like in the session and perception. Like and I know longitudinal training studies. I need to find this because I think it was at a Evolve Move Play seminar, and Rafe Kelly brought it up, but I'm like, it makes sense to me as if there was this study, or maybe it was just a case study. I can't find it in the scientific literature anywhere, but it was the idea that you have 3 sprint training groups, and one is told exactly what your time is, each session. One is told you ran slower than what you did, like not by a lot, but like, I don't know, a couple tenths or 10th. And one is told that you were running faster than what you actually did. And at the end of the study, the group that was told, but believable, like it's not like you're like a 12-second 100 guy and you ran 10.6.
Yeah.
No, you're lying, but it's like a little lie you could believe. And then you start to integrate that into your perception of self. And
Yeah.
I guess, I just think about people who do jump mats or any jump test that you can cheat or gamify too. Like I remember seeing enough jump mat tests, especially back when I was at Cal. I'd see a lot of athletes who would jump, and you see this everywhere, is you jump and then you're going to pull up your legs enough on the landing so that you can at least feel good about your number, like whatever it is, whether it's
there's a cute benefit in the moment. Well, what about 3 months later? You're still doing that, and it's not.
Oh yeah, they have to, because it's like once you start pulling the feet up, you will always have to do that, because as soon as you land normal, you're going to get a wrong number.
Somebody's not allowing that to happen, but yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think what I've realized is like athletes who are given their own means. I think, you mentioned all the people you've tested. I know you've tested a ton of kids. But I feel like if you didn't say you have to land with pretty straight legs, the kids will just start doing that. They'll start squatting the landing because it gives them the highest number. And in some sense, I think about Well, a couple things. One is, well, back to the perception, I almost wonder if in the session, if you had athletes do like 10 jumps and one group was told the result is lower than what it actually is normally, one
Mhm.
group's told what it is, and one group is told, "Oh, you're actually jumping 2 inches higher or something." But then but that was just what they were being told, but then you had the actual reading. I wonder if the athletes who were told they were jumping a little higher actually would be jumping a little higher at the end of it all. Of course, you can't go crazy with it, right? Like,
Mm.
what if it just jump said you were jumping 3 inches higher than the vertex? It becomes unbelievable, right? I just think about how belief, yes, there's like data and tracking and long-term management, but then there's also belief and that. But it has to be consistent because as soon as the belief falters, like if you believe something for a set time and then you
Yeah.
realize it was a trick, then you're in trouble. So it has to almost be like this little game you play.
Yeah.
Um,
You and I have also been in a situation where we've been using technology that we didn't trust, and we're like,
oh
"This
yeah,
ain't like this. There's something going on here, whether it's a laser or a jump testing device." And then that's also that's the worst feeling because you're like, "I can't trust this." So again, with the good old just jump mat that has been around, is still around to this day. You got to give credit where it's due. Like it's consistent and it's reliable. And then even though the mat can be degraded over time and things like that, it's still very much so a trustworthy piece of equipment.
for sure. I think most coaches who have used, well, I was thinking of also like a free lap timing system versus like a Swift. Like I've heard coaches, I think maybe even like Chris Corfus has said like sometimes that free lap because of the way the magnets hit the relay or however it works, you
Yeah.
occasionally get times that are objectively faster than you would expect. Like the timer like hits early, dings early, however the relay catches it. And I think
Mhm.
that what has been said is like, yeah, the laser is going to give you consistent, occasionally get fast from the free lap. I feel like I've seen that too. Like you'll see a kid hit time, and then one is like way faster than you
Yep.
would expect. But sometimes I think about it like, well, if you're that kid and you walk away from that practice like, oh yeah, I don't know. Sometimes, again, it's a little bit
Yep.
of a game, but I think about that sometimes. And but what I did want to get to, and I want to ask you about combine training here. I don't want to make this whole show a deep dive nerd out over specific, because to me it's like
Uh,
test perception reality. Maybe that's an interesting thing, but what I really like about the RSI test, I want to get into the RSI test the way you do it on the Plyomat,
yep.
is like I've almost gotten to the point where I almost prefer RSI tests on the mat, but then jumping, real life jumping. Like how high of a hurdle did you jump over? How good was your dunk? How
Yeah.
high did you touch on the vertex? Because you can't cheat those things with the landing anyway. And you can't cheat the RSI with the landing. Well, I guess the last one you kind of can, but it's a little bit harder. You got to be an expert, I feel
I
like.
mean, yeah, there's ways to gamify
Okay.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. But our side does favor ground contact mathematically being better to improve your score, but that's something we'll talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've really just shifted quite a bit in the last 3 months to just focus almost entirely on single leg RSI.
Mm,
RSI, I don't think is dead, and I don't think it's necessarily going away. I think we just can use it better, and it is still telling us valuable information. It's still
mm.
cluing us into what's going on with the athlete, how their strategies are. It's helping them understand plyometrics to begin with. I love RSI as a teaching tool. It's
Right.
fantastic because a lot of kids don't understand. If you think about Matt McInnes Watson's, tier system with, ping tier, light, medium tier, deep tier. Like a lot of that has to do with strategy and how springy you are with, your mechanics essentially with the different plyo that you're doing. And some plyos are appropriate for certain populations of where they're at, and some are very inappropriate as to what you're telling the athlete. And our side really helps to sort of guide that process where something like a plyomat can help, direct like, let's just focus on ground contact time only with this particular drill, or like
Mm.
even the drill that you did in your garage was like a lateral kind of hop
Right.
or, run through the hurdle. Just a little thing like that, that's like kind of a normal movement that you would do, maybe for a football, like footwork drill, it's just giving them feedback. They're not worried about RSI necessarily in that moment, but they're being guided and directed by what's a good ground contact time for this drill. And again, it's context. But so I think RSI is, now that we've really tested it more intently with single leg stuff the past few months with the combine guys, is telling us a lot about
Mm.
what they're missing in their sprint profile. And that's really because when you talk about RSI mathematically favoring contact time, well, with single leg stuff, that's typically the issue, and that's quite literally the one thing that needs to be improved upon is single leg ground contact time, and why you do some of these single leg reactivity drills in the first place, because you're dealing with mass in your whole body on one leg. So contact time being rewarded in that sense is not necessarily a bad thing at all. And we're just seeing this clear separation of some of our athletes and combine athletes because of their ability to be more reactive on one leg. I mean, it's pretty plain in it, and it's also from a symmetry thing, really enlightening too, to see the difference between a left leg and a right leg when you're testing them independently.
Mm.
You're cueing single leg 5-hop RSI left, single leg 5-hop RSI right, and you're like, wow, that is a massive difference. And like, oh, let's remember the fact that this athlete has had 2 ACLs on this side,
Yeah.
kind of a botched rehab, and the latest, you know, fast track to get back on the field type of deal, and it's a reason why he's slower than so and so, because his switching is pretty good and his projection is good, but clearly reactivity on that side, we got to get that up to speed like ASAP. So just things like that I think single leg reactivity, now that we're honing in on it more, getting more context from reactive string standpoint, and then now just really creating the right charts. I think visualizations to see the data, better than just a quadrant. The quadrant's good, but I also want that asymmetry of left and right. I want to visualize that quickly and just be able to let the athlete know they are improving. They are getting better on that one leg. And I mean, I can't tell you how important that is symmetry wise for your both legs to be reactive and on the same page, whereas that's often not the case with a lot of these guys. So
Yeah. Before we go any further, too, I know a lot of people know the definition of RSI. I've said it a bunch of times before, being like, hey, let's define it. And here we are a little past 15 minutes in. But could you define the single leg RSI or RSI test, and then just talk about the single leg variation of that as well? And then I want to talk about that with your combine group.
yeah, so reactive strength index, popularized by Eamon Flanagan, I think more so, at least when I came across it, is basically jump height divided by contact time, jump height in meters. We opted as a Plyomat owner to actually do flight time divided by contact time, which mathematically is pretty similar. And we did that because Plyomat doesn't technically measure jump height. We measure flight time. So I took the approach of we measure flight time and then convert that to jump height. But RSI wise, I'd rather take the flight time divided by the contact time. So that's why maybe some of the numbers are going to be different between us and some other technologies that use that other equation. And then RSI, then it can be whatever protocol you want to come to that number, whether it's RSI, flight time divided by contact time from a depth drop jump, from a repeat 10-5 RSI test, which has been popularized quite a bit in research. Could simply be a single leg RSI test where it's a one-off or repeated. So there's now, upwards of 5 to the Scandinavian rebound test. There's 5 to 10 that are like really popular tests that take jump height from the athlete and divided by contact time. And Lance Brooks published the DRI, the Dynamic Rebound Index, as a way to complete the RSI's goal with evaluating reactivity, and that he's also factoring in entry height. So you essentially are recording drop-in height, whether it's solidified from a box or if you're already on the mat, you jump and then hit a rebound jump, so it actually can factor in automatically what your initial jump height is. So that's something that we're going to build into our app, is actually create a DRI formula where Joel can be in his garage, self-select that initial jump, and then boom, rebound jump out of that, and then that'll be factored in to your score, which I love because athlete want to self-select that. If there's something about stepping off of it's like you're on a pirate ship going off the plank, like stepping off of a 20 centimeter box or a 30 centimeter box that you just maybe don't feel as confident, as opposed to self-selecting that initial jump and then rebounding that just feels more confident, feels more engaging and fun. I think for kids and athletes. And that's something Matt and I have done for a couple of years now with our linemen is instead of like, you know, actually recording that initial hop into the mat, we just allow them to choose, like that initial strategy of like pushing forward with both feet in the mat or hopping kind of onto it and then hitting an RSI. But unlike DRI, that doesn't factor that initial one mathematically. It's just RSI, but it's still, in my opinion, one of the best ways to teach that initial reactivity where athletes aren't really grasping what it means to produce a lot of force in a very short amount of time, which is what a lot of our goal is with our reactivity work. So we start off a lot with the 2-leg, we call it max RSI test. And then we work in a single leg, same thing. You and I have talked about that before. I think me, you, and John Garish had a good discussion about that last time we were on. Is what I had seen is a really high correlation with single leg max RSI and sprint ability in youth athletes, like really high correlation, higher than force plate jumps, higher than pretty much anything else. And then the step further, in my opinion, to that is now the cyclical 5-hop, where I'm having to really tolerate all of this landing force from my own jump height that I'm creating on the single leg 5-hop RSI. And that's the one that I'm wanting to really flesh out even more. Yeah. And again, have tested that with our combine guys, have built that into our analysis to know who's lacking reactivity. And it's just so obvious. Whenever you test it and you look at the numbers, you're like, man, this is what so-and-so is missing. Like, we have to get them better at single leg reactivity. Then it becomes a process of like, okay, how do we get that better, right? Is it isometric work? Is it, foot ankle series? Is it, a lot of different isos where it's just putting the foot in certain positions to get the foot stronger? Is it just the body weight issue, carrying too much mass? I mean, obviously you begin to troubleshoot so many different ways to improve single leg reactivity, but it without a doubt has been an exceptional way to assess it.
Yeah. Athletic performance is built on a spectrum of training methods, from high velocity skills to power training to strength work. And on one end of that spectrum, on that strength end, you have the most targeted work in the form of machines. And this is part of the reason that so many top speed and strength coaches have their favorite machines to deliver that targeted stimulus. For decades, Hammer Strength has been a top provider of reliable, effective machines that are trusted by coaches and athletes worldwide. They fit seamlessly into that total performance program, delivering that targeted strength stimulus. When it comes to your machine-based strength training needs, think Hammer Strength. I thought the study was really cool with the different ways, the different tests, because everyone wants to correlate the tests to the speed, but that single leg RSI was the king of all of them and had the better correlation. And that makes sense. I think other people have mentioned that usually if you can run fast, a lot of times you have a pretty good double leg RSI, but it doesn't necessarily work the other way around. Like, just because you have a good double leg RSI, you might not be able to use that in speed.
RSI, and I'm slow as molasses, so
yeah,
I know how to do it. I'm good at the skill of it, but I'm not as good at the double leg repeat, which I would kind of refer to that as like system stiffness. So I think the double leg RSI still serves its purpose of like evaluating just total system stiffness, how well I'm timing things. I've seen that correlate really highly with relative trap bar deadlift in athletes in the past.
Yeah,
where, like Trunk Street, even Stuart McGill had like a reactivity / final strength kind of paper that was published a while back, and that was really insightful for me because that's what I was saying too. Like, athletes with like great core strength and can chin up like crazy and trap bar deadlift, they tended to be really good with maintaining that stiffness and spinal control and repeat double leg hops. Anybody can get good at just the max one, right? You do it enough times, you kind of figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it becomes a skill to itself, to a little bit, Yeah.
Single leg, man, that's like really what. Like, if you're really good at that, chances are you are also very fast. Like, or fast for your frame, because it just exposes everything. The single RSI, that repeat 5-hop, you're like, goodness gracious. Like, I mean, I think back to the first time I ever experimented with it was actually at GAC 2016. We were on the just jump mat and we were doing the 4 jump mode on the just jump mat, and we're testing RSI, the Just Jump manual called it explosive leg power factor, ELPF. And I had a kid, a basketball player, his name was Roy Dixon, and he was doing the single leg hop. And I was like, dude, you're killing this thing. Like it was like a 1.6, which at the time was like astronomical above everybody else. And, real lean guy, like good player. He ended up playing basketball at Northwestern. And that same year, or maybe the year after, he had decided to go out to the track and like do track and field for the first time in his life. Like never ran track, never jumped or anything. Long jump, first ever time doing it, 21 feet.
Mhm.
He ended up hitting 23, I think maybe even 24. Like he made it to state. And I'm like, that's not surprising to me because I'm just seeing how springy this dude is on one leg. So like he just had to get things figured out. And he didn't have the highest vert necessarily of the group. He didn't have some crazy dunk package. Like he was kind of a smaller guy, but man, you watched him do anything popping off one leg, and like, the long jump was like the perfect event for him. Like it came so natural. So that was really interesting to see.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of like a Matthias Furlani, that Italian. He's like, he had the U20 records or U18. I'm not sure how old he is now. I mean, maybe 19, but he's jumping like 27 plus or 830 plus.
Wow.
Like really far, but he doesn't look like a guy who has a big standing 2-leg jump. He just looks like a bouncing stick, like with just these insanely springy single leg contacts.
Yep.
But yeah, I was going to ask you. So with that single leg RSI having the highest correlation to sprint ability, is there that was based on just a single that you did, like
I was just
a
single.
hop minute versus like you're moving more towards. And this was, well, I like this too, like the 5-hop test where you just jump up and down 5 times and it gives you the average, I think. Or maybe the old school version of that would be, I saw an old high jump video series that I had. It was Ed Jacoby. It was like Boise State and had this blue track. And the guy, who was the guy? It was like a Jamaican or Bahamas guy, Troy Kemp. This guy was jumping 7'9" and he was like 6 feet tall, just a freak show athlete. And one of their big tests was just, it was like 20 seconds, so pretty long. It was just a double leg side to side hop over like a bench in the weight room for 20 seconds. But watching Troy do that, I'm like, this guy, he's like effortless, just basically just picking his feet up, just barely, but it looks like the easiest thing in the world for this guy. And I suppose, if you do that for 10 seconds, you kind of have a little bit of a rudimentary double leg RSI. It's the same idea. Or if you do that on a single leg over like a hurdle, kind of same idea, So I always was like, wow, that makes sense. This guy's a lot better at that than I am. But I like the 5 because it does seem like it reduces the amount that you can cheat it. Like you can't, at some point you just can't, like you can't cheat the landing. I mean, you could squat the last landing, but still it's the average of the 5 and it just is more rhythmic, and it makes sense to me that you would do that. And I also see like, it also reminds me a little bit of like, the Power Plus Instagram account where it's like based off the Marinovich and Sports Science Lab items. And it's a lot of like barefoot single leg, like pop, 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 pop stuff. It reminds, like that kind of idea reminds me of it a little bit as well.
The reason why I chose the single leg though, with my population of middle school, high school kids who are, we're not track trained, like typically not really speed trained, to be honest. And it's a lot of, football players, basketball, you name it. And I opted for the single leg because it felt like most athletes could be generally successful with it. The single leg 5 hop, like most of our kids, if they were to do it, and I really haven't tested with that population, like they would just feel terrible doing it. Like they would just feel like super weak, super, like, am I even doing this right? Like, what was that? Like so there's just, I think, a little bit more of a requirement, I guess, to be, that doesn't mean it's not telling you what you want it to tell you, but like, I guess you know what I'm talking about, like with you doing it yourself, more lately, it's maybe 10 to 15% of our population would actually, as they do it, feel like they're doing a good job or like doing the test right. Whereas most kids can just step up and hit something one time and it'd be okay. But I could also say the same thing for sprinting. There's a lot of kids that are sprinting and they just feel slow. So, I mean, I guess you could kind of go that way with that too. But it is a pretty intense test, but it's intense in the way where you're not really going to get hurt because if you're pretty weak at it, you can't even jump high.
Yes.
You're not even creating enough force anyway. So it's like they're getting this high off the ground and it's like, and it's just like they just feel like they're crumbling. Their body just feels like goo, and that's kind of obviously what's the problem is they just don't, the reactivity wise, entire body mass on that 1 foot and that one time, even if it's a vertical plane versus horizontal, like it's really exposing again that reactivity issue. And we've talked about this a lot. We talk about RSI to help us understand and measure reactivity. And 2 points I want to make is whenever, and I did this at GEC, whenever you choose to test RSI and you kind of put it on the pedestal of like, all right, here are the standards, here's what's good, let's roll, let's see if we're getting better at this. Like anything else, it becomes something that's a focal point where it's like every kid wants to get better at it. So they're learning how to game it.
Yes,
You're
yes.
hoping how to do it. And again, you accept that as a practitioner. You're like, well, if I'm up it on a pedestal, then everybody's going to try and figure out how to game it. And that's a natural thing. That's fine. And what I found with most double leg RSI tests is you really do reach that sort of threshold kind of early, like maybe within a year or two, where the athlete maybe just isn't making that much progress in it anymore. We've had kids, score out the wazoo on the double leg RSI test. And you're just like, man, well, that's a record. I hadn't seen that before, and they're really good at it. And so it's just, I guess there's more of a cap, I would say, on that particular assessment really taking you as far as you want it to go, and then you just kind of feel dissatisfied. And this is coming from somebody that I've been testing RSI for 11 years. So take it from me when I'm saying after collecting all this data, it's still a really good test to do, especially with the population that I'm working with middle school, high school. Like that repeat RSI is fantastic. And we'll still do it forever, probably at Triple F, because that's our population. But when you're dealing with the high level athletes, who really are trying to run something special or jump really well, then I think it's just that natural shift towards the single leg RSI. And maybe that's something you build out in your program somehow. Maybe you're doing both. So yeah, I guess in saying, making that point, I don't necessarily have a recommendation other than depending on what population you're working with, it can be a big deal. And for certain populations, like you're just kind of chasing after something that's like, all right, I'm looking good
Yeah.
now. System stiffness, check. Let's move on to something else. Single leg, or, RSI might be better. And the other point I wanted to make was, like visualizing this more recently from an asymmetry standpoint really is, I think, the new thing we need to be more focused on. And I'm not a big asymmetry guy because I just have rarely ever trusted a lot of the technology, to measure asymmetry, especially with bilateral movements. Because I could do a vertical jump and I feel like my left glute firing more than my right, and that's going to jack up all the data. And I felt it, Whereas if you do something totally separately, this limb and this limb, and I can trust that. Like I can really, look at the data and know like, okay, this 15% plus difference in left and right, like is telling me a lot. And I've also seen with our combine guys, just a totally different strategy. On their left, they're quick contact, not as good jump height, but decent score. Right side, complete opposite. Long contact, high jump height, kind of similar score. And it's like, okay, what do you do with that information? But when you're talking with sprinting, a lot of what we also notice in their first 3 steps on the 10-yard dash, it's like long contact, quick contact, long, quick. And then that becomes a problem because it's like, no, we need to be, yes, you're going to have a natural long contact on that first step anyway, but what your third, fourth, and fifth step are losing their ability to project you forward because of just how much you keep wanting to like almost, it kind of looks like they're like limping on the one side, it's like long, long, long. So I don't know, you have more of a track background. I don't know if that's something you've kind of noticed even with kids that you've been coaching, is like they just tend to favor, that one side a little bit more strategically.
Yeah, that's actually even beyond track, maybe even also more general. Justin Moore mentioned this in the podcast a long time ago. This is back in more my, I would almost call it my pre-Bill Hartman knowledge of Bill Hartman. But back in when I was going like PRI seminars at Postural Restoration Institute, and Justin was talking about also, digging from PRI, how basically like people get kind of stuck on their right side. Like they have a hard time getting off of their right side from a respiratory perspective. Just with like hyperinflation of the left rib and then getting down on the right and getting stuck. And so you have to be able to use respiration and various weight room activities. You'd use breathing.
Well, the balloons.
Oh, that's idea.
You
Blow
don't
up
want
the balloons. Yeah. Blow up the balloons.
them like this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's funny because I know I'm majorly like pulled down on my not major. There's people who are worse, but I definitely have it. And I notice when I do any like heavy strength training blocks, it gets worse. Actually, not to it's just part of the adaptation. It's just being, working with compression. But then, yeah, it's interesting to getting out of that and how much is too much. Is it a problem? Can you work with it? That
Mhm,
kind of thing. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I wanted actually to mention something. You mentioned kind of gamifying the test,
mhm,
and I do think it's probably worth mentioning anytime, right? We do a topic or talk about training that's not the actual thing. Like if you want to get better at the 40, something that's not the 40, like Parkinson's law, right? Like the measure that you put on a pedestal. If it's not the main thing, you can divert away from eventually what you should be. But I do think, I just anecdotally, it's interesting doing, just getting into single leg RSI and being actually having the number on it with the plyomat. And I've done all sorts of single leg hopping and lateral and various things that are great, but it's very stimulating to do that 5 hop test and get a score, because it's more stimulating to get the score than it is to just necessarily hop. Oh, if someone's like timing me over little hurdles and single leg, that's great too. That's very diverse and great. But I find that after doing a few of the like 5 single leg RSI hop tests and trying to get my score as high as I can, like if I was to go out and jump, like I put up like the vert trainer outside in the sidewalk, or I just got this like jump ball that puts a hoop like the ball up, a certain height. Like I feel really potentiated in a really good way. And not like how heavy squats necessarily or
mhm.
explosives to potentiate your jump squats. It's more like from the foot up. And it reminds me a little bit of how I operated a little bit more in my younger years. Back before I had quite the weight training base, but was
Oh,
doing depth jumps, like the depth jump science of jumping program, and my elasticity was like insane. And
you're
my
saying you were even wearing some of those weights around your ankles too, right? Weren't you?
yeah, I could talk to you about that too. Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful too. Lilaxygen and
Talk about
different things that
differentiation right there on the
yeah, it does.
platform. Yeah,
It
I would crumble if I did that probably, but
Yeah. Yeah, I accidentally had one on the back. Yeah, I could tell you about that, but I just wanted to say, like, I think the cool thing is almost when in some senses, because I could tell, like, I could tell if I was getting too like, if I'm trying to, if I'm high jumping and I'm putting too much into single leg RSI. Well, honestly, it's almost like you flip it, like, if instead of jumping and then doing the test after, it's like doing it as a warm-up, like, I think is really valuable. Like, I feel really good after doing that, and, yeah, I just think it's a really powerful tool. It reminds me I think about as well, like you mentioned the correlation, and I think about how different a test like that feels than, it's good to get stronger, but being in the squat rack, it doesn't, the chain of muscles and the where the force is coming from is like, to me, it's almost the opposite. It's almost like if you're going to build an athlete, you almost have the two sides. And if you had squat max on one side and single leg RSI hop, 5 hop on the other, they're almost on the opposite ends as I see. I'm curious what you think about that.
no, 100%. And again, it goes back to like understanding what it is that we're trying to measure. And I've referred to stiffness a lot because stiffness is your ability to reject deformation,
Mhm.
right? So like the athletes like Roy, who was mentioned on single leg, like his body looked totally the same. Like he's just like a human pogo stick. Whereas me and a lot of other people,
Mhm.
like that, you just can tell like this energy loss, and we just like, oh, like I felt that, and I just couldn't maintain the stiffness that I wanted to score well as hard as I'm trying.
Sure.
Like that's system stiffness to me, and what I've referred to it with our combine guys is like just total body, both legs, like springy, just bounce like with both legs. But then you take it to the single leg approach, it's still system stiffness for the most part, but when I have them run and jump off of one leg, like, because we have a basketball gym at Triple F too, like we'll go up and try and like dunk off the left 3 times, up on the right 3 times. Like most 1 foot jumpers really stick to the same leg, obviously, but like you can tell who feels really confident off of 1 foot and who feels confident on two. And like that to me, again, is a glaring discrepancy. Like we should all aspire to be 1 foot jumpers. We should all aspire to be good single leg reactivity wise on most normal tasks, especially with jumping. And I think the key time to really address a lot of that is middle school, high school,
Yeah.
the type of plyos that we're doing. They don't have to be that crazy and intensive. It could just be more volume based, but like doing anything on single leg, hopping and Matt has really big time made hopping popular. He's constantly posting these videos of guys like just, hopping down a track lane, and those guys are usually pretty fast who can do that. We all need to be hopping. It's just going to be a different level, or, at a different stimulus as the intensity goes. But like for the most part, we still need to be doing some sort of hopping, and whether that's vertically, horizontally. Vertically, we like to do it with the bands, a little band assisted. I feel more confident off of one leg. Um, it's just, man, it's one of the most underrated ways to develop reactivity. And, track people know how valuable it is, but I think most people outside of track aren't really using it as much as they should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned band assisted. I am curious about that one because no, is that bands are pulling you up like
The LD racks, the
yeah.
triphase arms, like we always have bands hanging from those. Sornex has been great with kind of building those in. And so we have different bands, with thin orange, red, and we just always have them hanging there. So especially our big guys for 330 pounds,
Oh
and
yeah.
here we are trying to get them to run a 5.2 on the 40-yard dash, like we use it as a big strategy. It's like, let's unload you a little bit, let's develop this reactivity without having as much weight on you. Let's lower the mass, and then let's do the drill just so we can get the volume we need, because otherwise we're just not able to get nearly as much volume if we were to do just body weight. So with our deep tier stuff, guys who have like bad tendonitis, who just have a hard time bending and like getting deep into their ankles and knees, which we need that for when they're doing the agility test, and really anything else. But any sort of our single leg plyos, it's almost like a non-negotiable. Like we work in a lot of band assisted to offload some of their body weight. For some of them, it's the green bands. Like green bands down, let's get 10 hops in place, and they can get a little cycle with it, which that's something that we didn't mention yet
Yeah.
with testing a single leg 5-hop RSI. And I'm sure you've already noticed this, but the natural kind of gait with it is to tuck, hip and knee up. I don't know if you've experienced that for yourself as much. I basically got to the point where I'm just coaching that. Like I'll just tell the athlete, like, hey, you go ahead and tuck up and get more of an actual cycle when you're doing the single leg 5-hop, as opposed to just expecting it to just be
Yeah.
like this lower level, like foot only and like a pogo. It doesn't feel like a pogo because it's with single leg and all that mass. It's pretty hard to maintain that, whereas it feels so much more natural, in my opinion, to like, get more lift up into it as you cycle. So I think some people will see that. And I think Matt posted a video of somebody or his buddy Derek at a seminar doing the single leg 5-hop RSI, and he's really like tucking. It's almost like a single leg tuck jump. But I think that's kind of what's necessary in order to do well and score well on it. Because even like a hop, if you're doing a hop for distance, you still have that natural cycle as well. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree in the sense of yeah, like energy transport and beginner level single leg hopping is usually just more single leg shuffling, like the foot shuffles along the ground, and
Mm.
so of course you're going to get a. I guess the thought is like, well, it's not if you should cycle, I think, because you should, but the question to me is how big. Like you sent me that. You sent me like some NFL guy, like 240 pounds, getting a 2.0 on the RSI, obviously beast, and like he had a super cycle up there.
Big cycle.
But I was thinking about, like you mentioned also, like in the same vein, like, so I think that's good, but I also think about like being a good plyometric athlete, but not maybe being as fast. Like you mentioned yourself, and I mean, I can identify with that. I mean, I was a high jumper, triple jumper.
Yeah.
I wasn't winning the 100-meter dash. Like not everyone, it's like just because you're reactive at one thing doesn't mean that it's going to totally plug in. But I look at, I feel like part of the reason that almost in some sense, the further I got away from team sports, which is high frequency spinning, a lot of it, spinning the
Mhm.
wheel, high frequency cuts and very quick movements. And almost when I just became too plyometric, I would say in like my mid to late 20s, um, almost everything becomes too full foot, like too full foot, too cycling. It's good for triple jumping, but I think I lost a little bit of some of that forefoot kind of dominant type items that sprinting is more midfoot, forefoot, rolling from outside to inside. So a lot of times I do plyomat now. I cycle, but I try to almost make it like a mini cycle,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. Like
Mhm.
it happens naturally. Like I feel like if I did a
Yeah.
big cycle, I could maybe get a higher score, but I think I might spend longer on the ground. I don't know. It's like
That's
you're really
yeah.
maxing eccentric. By doing that big cycle, you eccentrically max it,
That's
which
kind of like the more I test it, which I haven't like published a blog or anything on it. I'm kind of hesitant because like I want to make sure I've done enough research with it to guide the strategy I think that I would recommend. And part of it is like, okay, if I do have bigger cycle, I'm only in the air longer, so it's just going to be like you said, so much harder for me to deal with that added uh, you know, force coming back down to that same foot. So, which again, why I love the test because you just really can't cheat it, no matter
yeah.
how much it might look like a big cycle might be helping you. It's not helping you. So, I think I want to look more into comparing those strategies for same athlete.
Mm.
For multiple athletes across multiple tests. For weeks, and that's something I want to look at because I think what we'll find is it's just more of like forefoot, midfoot versus full foot. I think that's just kind of what we'll see, as a strategy difference, but I don't know that it's going to affect the score that much. So,
Mm. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I could see that. I haven't really tried the big full foot. Usually, and I think it's just intuitive for me at this point. I've done so many hops. I'm like, look, I know for this to transfer to what I need, it has to be fast or well, like more. If I full foot it like I do, if I was to do a single leg hopping exercise, like a full or like a bounding left, right, right, it'd be good, but I need to get more forefoot oriented. And yeah, I think I was going to ask you that actually, just qualitatively speaking, do you see a difference between people who are like kind of poppier off that forefoot and doing the single leg RSI and people who kind of tend to almost more prolonged dorsiflexion, flat foot oriented? Like, notice anything with that or? Uh,
because most of our testing so far with it, like really dialing in and testing it consistently, has been with our 200 and
the,
you know
the big guys. So yeah,
80.
they're not going to be pinging off forefoot. Probably. Oh no,
It's no forefoot
no,
at all.
no,
It's
no.
it's full foot, and they're taking their time as they should because they're dealing with all that mass.
Yeah,
Even when we bound, or do any hopping, it's like, man, like I tell them, take your time, like transfer this well, and then the sprinting is enough for them to
oh
get
yeah,
that midfoot forefoot work.
yeah,
Like there's no real need to specify some sort of plyo around that when they're sprinting already, and we sprint so much. So if anything, if I'm just trying to do it to help with just overall improving reactivity, well, maybe even like band them up to where they have some resistance to where they can kind of handle it more because they're not as fast horizontally. So like single leg hops going forwards with the band actually tend to be more successful with like midfoot, forefoot because they're just not going as fast. They're not going as hard.
mm,
But other than that, yeah, they're definitely more flat-footed on it. I've got several videos, I'll show you, and I mean, the ground contact times are, not impressive by any means. They're
mhm,
0.35, and things like that, and as they should be. But again, definitely see a correlation between sprint ability, no question. And then it's just a matter of factoring in their mass too. So we need to work that into the calculation. Like it's body mass plus single leg 5-hop RSI scores and seeing how that can improve speed and help our strategies. But a big thing that Matt and I did once we completed all this testing and reactivity profiling, if you will, which isn't really like formally a thing, but that's what we're trying to do with all this reactivity stuff, is we started to bucket them with certain drills where we knew they only could do so many reps before it would just start getting ugly. So every Tuesday for sure we would have some stations all laid out. Some were more like kind of lower threshold single leg reactivity drills. Some were, two leg, jumps over hurdles with contact time as a priority. We just did all kinds of stuff. I paired different ISOs with it too. So that we would hop in the ISO fit
mm,
and do like a Zercher, squat hold. We would hop in the belt squat and do a single leg ISO. That was fantastic. And I really enjoyed doing that. Or just kind of continue to work through what we felt was the deficiency with their profile and just kept attacking it. It just made it a priority. Meanwhile, on other days, we're definitely still doing jumps and we're doing sprints, but to really try and, you know, sort of isolate and focus in on the area that we knew, like, this is glaring. Like we have to prioritize this just in terms of what drills we're doing, and we had a lot of success with it. I mean, the guys started to feel more confident with the things that they felt they sucked at. So that's
mhm.
good.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I actually want to ask you that about the ISOs, and yeah, with the flat foot, full foot, I did want to kind of mention too. I mean, when you're jumping vertically, like even anything single, like you're gonna have a whole foot. To me, it's more. where's the majority of the pressure? Like,
Mm.
is it more pressure getting buried in the midfoot? Does the heel stay on the ground a long time? Or is it more the pressure, if you kind of had this sliding scale pressure from heel to front of the foot, would you have it a little bit more in the forefoot area and the heel comes off the ground quick? That's more what I'm mentioning. But I'm sure with those, the bigger guys you get, like, and I do want to mention before I ask you about the ISOs, I really like you mentioned the band assisted with single leg. It's interesting because I think a lot of people, gosh, it's like, sometimes I feel like, the allegory of like, yeah, you're stacking rocks over here and then you stack rocks on the other side as if like we're arguing in strength and conditioning about things that don't mean anything. Like, let's have another Olympic lifting argument or let's
Well,
argue about this. But like,
I
uh,
had no idea there was so much beef around band assisted stuff.
yeah, there's people who hate it.
Yeah, okay.
I've never had a bad experience from using it. I mean, I remember first time I saw, triphasic, and when I was at Cal, they had the high Sornex racks, and I've never had a bad experience with that. I've always felt it was nothing but positive. Athletes, they like it too. Like, I feel like it's nothing but positive for athletes, and they also enjoy it. So it's like, well, if you have those,
With timing too,
yeah,
you're like,
exactly.
okay, close things down, they feel more confident. It's like, there's just so many benefits to me with the populations I work with that I'm like, I can't believe there's people that are just anti-band.
Oh yeah, and for single leg, honestly too, you mentioned the single leg, and I see a lot of single leg hopping with athletes who are probably a little heavier and maybe like a wide ISA, who I'm like, it's a nice exercise, but you don't. I think there's some athletes who to do the big magnitude single leg hops. I just think it's not. It's too
Mhm.
much. Like, it's
Right.
like, and that the banded, but I could see those same athletes. Hey, let's band it up. And, I mean, single leg hopping is an intense exercise, but I could see very well, like, if you want to improve your single leg RSI and build out that tree into your single leg jump or your single leg jumping and your sprint contacts, I could see the assisted single leg being really, really helpful. I mean, if I had to set up right in my garage, I would do it right now, so I think it's,
Pull some hooks into the ceiling, Joel. You may have to.
I do have a bicycle, like, where people used to hang bicycles. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm going to rip it on
Bicycle
the
rack.
wall.
There you go.
But you know what? The one thing too, I think, people make these arguments, and it's like, well, where's your argument coming from? Because I'll tell you one place my argument comes from with that stuff is, I think a really effective analogy and visual for like a standing vertical is to visualize yourself being pulled up by those bands. If you've ever had a jump, been use them for a jump,
Yeah.
visualize bands pulling you up. And like this, it gives you context for cues and systems that could eventually make your movement more effortless.
Yeah.
If you want to become more elastic, isn't that something you want to do? Like, don't you want to have that as part of your system? I'm not
Yeah.
saying, it's magic and everybody has to have it and must be part of your system, this triphasic and complex training that's on the end. But I think it's valuable. I think it gives you something, it can give you something that is of value and also the visual.
Yeah, like I saw you on Instagram repost JB Marin's, I guess a
Oh, yeah.
student had the Swiss ball that he was,
That's
or stability ball that he was just bouncing on. Same exact concept, right? Like the ball is helping to speed up, right, the movement so you can feel like how fast this extension of this jump should actually be, and you're like bouncing on it to get there. It's like being on a trampoline or using the bands. So the bands actually help understand the speed of that knee extension and how fast do you want it to be with the jump. It's like we'll use it a lot for like just a true, max vert or continuous jump, split squat jump, and we do all kinds of stuff with the band assisted, especially with our adult population who are,
Mhm.
members who are former athletes who've had all kinds of injuries. It's like, man, when they're able to just create that stability because of the bands and then also improve the timing, they can actually get some nice outputs through the leg extension that otherwise they just would not achieve those same outputs, I don't think. And we sometimes we'll have fun, we'll put a plyomat underneath it, and then we got kids jumping 70 inches on a vert.
Yeah,
And
hit eight RSI.
and it's fun. Like I have a video on my Instagram where it's a kid he's like a 5-star. He's a really impressive athlete, and he jumped 25 inches on the Hawken force plates, and he gets on it with the bands and just is having fun. And he's literally hitting 70 inches, like no joke. Like he's flying, and he's just so good at like pacing it and feeling good, and he could just take advantage of that assistance.
Mm.
Yeah. So people who hate or love overspeed and they're hating on band assisted jumps, like there's no way those things should be the same because people are using overspeed like crazy now with the 1080
Yeah.
and everything. So same concept.
Yeah, I mean, and people rationalize the overspeed, and I agree with it 100%, is that it teaches your body what it feels like to run just that next little bit faster. And you could even say like the same gradient between Plyomat and a just jump, and it gives you that extra height. It's like it's almost like, all right, if I wanted to feel,
Yeah.
yeah, if I wanted to feel what it's like to hit a 2-3 RSI on my left and right leg, just enough band to feel that. Oh, this is what this feels like. Oh, this
Yep.
is what it probably felt like when I was
Yeah.
21 and just popped off the ground and just could
But they
get
like it so much.
elbow closer and jam it. It's like, but I think being able to feel and access those feelings is important because we live in this world of, I mean, data, it's great, but like to also give athletes access to the feeling of what you should be aiming for to reach the next level and not just the resistance, like it's like almost every resistance should be matched with a level of effortlessness on the other side of it, lest we become these compressed, overly straining movers. I mean, I should say it doesn't have to be 1-to-1, but at least have that ability in the system. And that's way easier to put that than I mean, even overspeed's great, but like not everyone has mechanized assistance. Not everyone has a nice little hill to run down that's the right grade, or the setup. It's like it's very easy to just have a light band and just feel, oh, this is what it feels like to pop just a little bit better. I think it's really cool.
100%.
Isometrics. Got to get to ISOs here, Rich. I've been we got very far in our plyo and single leg RSI conversation, and I love it. But I do want to ask how you're using isometrics, or what is a like a flag for, hey, you need more isometrics. What are you doing? What's the super soleus fix? Like, I mean, just threw that in there. But like, tell me a little bit about how you're using ISOs to complement needs in your like combine groups and your assessments.
I may disappoint some people, but I don't have some super scientific approach to it. And, like we have 2 ISOFITs now in the gym. Brad Thorpe, who created ISOFIT, is a legend. He's awesome. I have a lot of respect for him and how he treats people, how he runs his business. And I love the machine. So it's a really easy to adjust system where you lower it, 15 degrees at a time, all the way to 90. So it can go from 90 all the way down to 15 and then flat. When you buy one, you also get a nice cushion that can sit on the floor in front of it. And you also have a cushion that like wraps around the handle. So, and he has tons of drills and exercises you can do. And so, when you separate the two predominantly popular ISO movements of overcoming and yielding, that's kind of more of how we bucket things at Triple F pretty easily. And I've just really been hammering on the single leg ISO work, predominantly on the belt squat. So even though we got the ISO fits, we're using some staggered stance pulls with it, especially some nice overcoming, pull as hard as you can. Like a Zercher split stance ISO is nasty. Like that one will just absolutely wake everything up, right? More than a cup of coffee will, for sure. But the belt squat, I found with rigging up a dynamometer to it and feeling safe, because I have some of the most powerful human beings on the planet in my gym, so I get nervous with anything ISO. And one of them is a top 10 pick this year. His name is Francis Maligoa. And you look at him, you're like, dude, I've got to make sure this thing isn't going to explode on the guy when he's because what got real popular in the NFL the last 5 to 10 years was the isometric mid-thigh pull. But I've also learned, and as I'm following along and talking to these former players and current players, people are getting away from the isometric mid-thigh pull because it's actually straining their backs. And
Yeah, I can see that.
Good. So
It happened to me.
yeah, because you're just creating so much stinking force that in that particular position, it's just, what are we doing? Like, and how much is too much, and why even measure in the first place when you're getting these other strength measures? But kind of beside the point. And like a lot of the things with our discussion, moving from system level, reactivity to single leg, I kind of had taken that approach too. Like if I'm actually going to measure like on a dynamometer how strong they are on some of these isometric things, I'm going to do single leg. And so what I found is, no surprise, like our better single leg reactivity guys were scoring really well on a single leg belt squat ISO. So it was basically like a 4 or 5 second, they're strapped up to the pit shark, and we're using Hawken Dynamics True Strength. It'll say hold still, and then it'll flash, and then boom, they're just like driving through the 1 foot as hard as they can. Floating heel, so I'm not necessarily telling them completely 4 foot, so it's more 4 foot, mid foot.
Yeah.
And I try and set up the belt in a way where we're all like got the right same amount of knee bend and hip bend with it, but that didn't create like a perfect scenario for that necessarily, but most of our guys were 6'5", so it's pretty much the same belt length, and they were just driving. They were just pulling into that forefoot as much as they could, leaning forward, grabbing the handles on the pit shark, and just drive, 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 drive. Some guys were getting 4,500 watts on one side and 4,500 watts on the other side, and some guys are struggling to get 1,500, and that's me. Like I don't think I broke 1,700 watts on either side, driving as much as I can, even cheating a little bit with my heel being down. And not only did I like what it was telling us, which again, was it necessary to do that as an assessment, knowing that I have their single leg reactivity scores already and probably came to the same conclusion, but I loved how it felt and what it did to wake up uh, really the peripheral system, I believe, as well as the nervous system. Like the muscles, man, just activating like crazy, like hip, glute, like every muscle in the lower limb. But it felt amazing. You hop off of it and you're like, I feel really good. Like I feel like I can just go hop across the basketball court right now. So we would pair that with a lot of our single leg reactivity work. And they would do like 3 rounds where they would do the ISO first. They would do probably like a Zercher as well, and then we're rolling right into our ISOs that again are so important, and we got to make sure they're high quality. But maybe at 9 a.m. first thing in the morning, they're not ready to hit that. Again, these are 330-pound humans, so I just felt better too, just from even an activation standpoint. Like, okay, we're ready to hop because we're producing 4,000 watts, isometrically on left and right. Like, all right, cool. And then so we did that week in, week out to wake things up, potentiate it, and so far so good. Guys are moving well and hopping well, and it's very specific to our population though with how I ran all that stuff. And we did use it with our youth athletes as well. It was already set up on the pit shark, so we would have some of them get in there and. I would say qualitatively speaking, they looked better, whenever we worked the ISOs in with it, and overall just had a great experience. The only thing is like, it's just slow, when you get 5-second ISO on left and then right, and it's a belt and you get the dynamometer, and it's like, so you get a lot of athletes to cycle through. That would be the only downside, but otherwise I absolutely loved the setup. I got several videos of us doing it on there and how I actually rigged the pit shark, but I felt like we weren't going to break it with how I set it up, so that's already good. And then B, man, I just felt like there was a lot of benefits to just driving through that single leg in a supported setup where, they weren't going to like fall over or anything like that. Because if you do some like 4-way hip ISOs on the ISO fit, you feel off balance, and to me that defeats the purpose with some of those things. So like we would hold PVC pipes to kind of ground us as we're doing like a adduction or an abduction. And to me, the whole point of those isometrics are to trigger the musculature that you want to hit so that the tendons are ready to do their thing. And you need, I think, more stability in order to do that well. So that's been my journey so far with those since November. I've been doing isometrics my whole career, but just like really targeting them in specific moments within our workout. I've had great success, man. The ISO fits are awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, just real quick with those single leg pit sharks. What's the knee angle? Is that like a 90 degree, a little higher?
Oh, yeah, higher than 90. Yeah. I would say,
Like
120. 120. Yeah. Whatever probably the angle that they were going to achieve with our single leg reactivity work. I didn't see any benefit to going deeper than that, because a lot of what we were trying to do was like hops for distance or even some lateral hops. So it was all pretty shallow range of motion. So.
Got it. Have you got any correlations, by the way? You mentioned the single leg RSI with especially the younger populations. With like the combine population, was there any correlation with like 40 yard or like some of the other things with the single leg RSI and then the ISO, what you were seeing there?
Absolutely. We have a tight
one more
end.
than the other two or the same? Yeah.
Yeah, we have a tight end. His name is Dallin Bentley, and he'll be drafted hopefully, second or third round, but maybe, past that. But he was off the charts on any single leg reactivity stuff and any single leg isometric stuff. And he's in the 4.5s, like runs 22 miles an hour. So, I mean, and he's 255 pounds. Yeah. So like, yes, And of course, I mean, it's a small sample size. It was him and 4 other tight ends, and then we had the linemen. But like, I mean, it's pretty obvious when you look at how much faster he is than some of the other guys, and then how good he is at anything single leg. Like, and the same with the video of the guy I sent you. He also was in the same camp of like 21 and a half miles an hour, almost 22 at that size. And his single leg stuff is off the charts too. He also was a jumper in college I'm sorry, he jumped in high school
Oh,
and
yeah.
he really,
I along to many pounds ago, a lot of muscle, like less muscle to be gained. Uh, yeah. Do you think just real quick, kind of closing out, I'm just curious with like, so the single leg pitch shark, it almost is like, in some regards, a, like the Alex Sotero stuff, obviously, I'm thinking of that. I'm sure a lot of people are, but like, the single leg iso push where it's floating heel, pretty straight leg, and then you got the hip push where you're on your back and pushing the hip up. It seems like that pitch arc is almost a mix of both of those. Like, have you used some of Alex's other items, or is that just one that you kind of put because it's specific position acceleration versus more top end? What are your thoughts on that?
I've done a lot of the spring ankle series stuff, and I've done a lot of like, even just on a wall drill, like a position, just driving to the wall off of 1 foot. And to me, like a prowler march is like a quasi ISO where you're like loaded heavy and you're driving in fours. And so I've done tons of things like that. I don't know if I've done anything specific to what Alex has done or advocated for. I haven't followed his stuff as closely lately, but the pitch shark, man, it just felt like I could check all those boxes safely, but more importantly, could actually measure with the dynamometer. Honestly, that was the biggest reason for setting it up in the pitch shark in the first place. But now with or without the dynamometer, it's to me just such a fantastic setup because it also has a forward positioning. Like all the athletes are kind of leaning forward naturally, and I think that that's important for what it is that we're trying to do. Like as far as horizontal, movement and displacement. So yeah, I'm obsessed with it, man. I think it belongs in every program. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Whether yielding or overcoming, I think doing it for 15 seconds would be nasty. But
Oh,
most
yeah.
of what we asked our guys to do was 5 to 7. But I can see it 15 to 20 and having huge benefits.
Yeah, makes me think a little bit about the like Landmine University, like where just the kind of ice. I think their first phase is like an ISO, like kind of hold against the landmine. The heels, of course, off the ground. It's kind of a horizontal direction, that kind of thing. So yeah, I just think stuff like that in the program I think is valuable. Or yeah, stuff on a sled too. I think you can do stuff like that with a sled or whatever. So but yeah, definitely important piece of it all. Rich, where can people learn more about obviously the Plyomat, what you're doing? Where can people go to learn more about that product and just single leg RSI and all that stuff?
Yeah, plyomat.com. We're going to be publishing a couple blogs here soon around single leg reactivity as well as just some other general reactivity type things. I'm a practitioner, so more than I am a business owner. Like I'm trying to answer these same questions and give the best for my athletes. So plyomat.com is where you'll see our products and can learn more about things there. And I'll also mention that we are in the process of producing a web app for our product where with the testing that you're doing in the app, and you can export it to a CSV file, like the way that you're doing it right now, Joel, with the single leg 5 hop, left and the right. Once you export that to a CSV, you can actually upload that to this new web app, and then it'll automatically, you know, organize the data for you to where it's per athlete. And then there's a single leg RSI chart that shows that asymmetry, left and right. And then the quadrant pulls up. So it's just a really easy way to track, your RSI data and the trends of it without you really having to do anything. So you test it in the app, export it, and then upload. Whereas hopefully sooner rather than later, the next step beyond that is to rebuild our whole app to where it's smart enough to just do all that for you. So you can skip the step of, export and then upload. But I still think the web app is going to be really insightful, I think, for everybody and to help us further answer these questions of what we're looking at.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, hey, thank you so much for being on, Rich. It was great talking to you here.
Yeah, appreciate it, Joel, as always.